Hey y'all, welcome back to day 4 of this renovation series. Still working on this entertainment center today, but I pretty much finished everything except for the face frame, which I will start on tomorrow. But for right now, let's get into how do you build the rest of this thing. So as you can see, I have my helper right there. And last episode, I pretty much framed the back and the front. Now I'm going to work on the sides and tying this thing all together and making sure it's perfectly square. So for the side that is going to go into the back part of the frame, I do use pocket holes right there. Technically, you could probably build this whole thing all in at once and then just stick it in the camper as a whole, but I don't really like to do that because I like to make sure that my framing hits the studs, and that's kind of hard to do sometimes if you put it all in one piece. So as you can see right there, I'm basically going to put these corner pieces on each corner so we can tie the front piece to the back piece. I'm also going to put these pieces anywhere where there's going to be a box. So the bottom part is just going to be kind of a panel to cover up the electrical and the water heater. The next spot up is going to be the fireplace. The spot right there in the middle that's big is going to be for the TV. And then above that, the left side is going to be a box, and the right side is really going to be for a radio. So I don't really need to frame that side out. So now that I got most of those corner pieces in, I'm going to start on a side piece that extends all the way down, because remember, the back piece didn't extend all the way to the floor. So I need a piece right there. That way I can attach a piece of paneling to the side of this, because obviously we need to have something right there to cover everything else up. So as you see right here, I just screwed another piece of framing support onto the back where my hand is right there. And that is so I can make this box on the inside right here. So if you think of this as a three-dimensional box, you'll need framing supports all around that box in order for you to have places for wood to attach when you enclose it. So right here, I'm just making sure this is square and my front lines up with my back, and it does, which is great. So I can go ahead and put a bottom support in this as well. Now I'm actually moving it forward a little bit because I don't need to frame out the right side of the box. I only need to frame out the left side of the box. So I'm moving it over. That way I don't have to cut my panel kind of a weird shape, because right now how this framing is, I have to cut off 1.5 inches square on each corner for the panel to fit in. But this way it'll just sit nice and flush, and I won't ever have to see the 1.5 inch cuts because it'll be covered up by the paneling on either side anyway. Now before I can start enclosing this top box right there, I need to move some of these wires back down into the wall because I did pull them back up in order to move some of this stuff around and get this framing where I needed it to be. So I'm just going to fish these wires back down through. There's nothing too crazy and complicated about it. I just pulled them out by hand because they were so close. I knew I'd be able to get them back in pretty easy, and I did. But there's multiple ways to fish wires through the wall if you're interested in me talking about that too. So this piece that I'm cutting right here is going to be the new backdrop for the TV area, because you see I have a really big hole on the top right there, and it's kind of ugly. So I'm just going to stick a new piece of paneling up here. That way there's no hole there. It's nice and fresh. And right here I am measuring where the outlets go, just measured over. And then I actually took the little squares that I had cut out from those spots before, and I just used that as a template after I marked my width and my height, and I just cut it out, and I mean, it fit perfectly. There's nothing crazy to it. So after I did my little test fit there and made sure it fit, I kind of peeled it back, and normally I would use some like liquid nails or something, but I didn't have any, so I'm using this Gorilla Spray adhesive, sprayed on both sides, and then just kind of press it down and hold it for a second and tack it in, and then I know where the framing is on that, so I can just tack it in with some staples. Now what you see me doing right here is cutting another hole for an outlet. I'm being really careful not to go too far in because I know for sure that there's wires there and I can't stick my hand inside the wall, obviously. So I'm doing another outlet right here because if you add a fireplace to an RV or a house or anything, it needs to be on its own breaker. So I'm giving this its own breaker, and it's really easy because the breaker box, the panel box, is literally right there. So I just feed it down through the wall, pull it back out, and that's pretty much all there is to that. It was even more convenient because I didn't have to buy the wire, because I do full electrical systems on horse trailers when I renovate them from scratch. So I had a bunch of this wire left over anyway, so I was like, yep, that's totally what I'm going to use it for. Now what I'm doing right here is I am cutting out the top for the entertainment center that the TV is going to sit on. I am using 1/2 inch plywood just because TVs can get heavy sometimes, and I like it to be a little thicker than the 1/4 inch plywood that comes standard in RVs. So this is just what I use. Plus I had some scrap left over anyway, so I figured I might as well go big or go home. And then I'll take my other side there because it's too long and cut it on my table saw because it's a whole lot easier than trying to cut it with a circular saw when I want to get a nice straight cut. So I'll go ahead and do that and then do a little sanding because I don't want to have to sand it once I put it in the camper because I'm trying to limit the dust that's in there. So I just gave it a kind of good quick down sand just to get all the rough edges off. So next I'm going to do a little test fit in the camper, and contrary to popular belief, I do not cut everything right the first time. There is an occasional occurrence where I don't get it exactly right, like this time. So I just took my multi-tool and I shaved a little bit down, and then it fit perfectly in there. So next I'm going to take this, it's like a little guard that guards the hot water heater from the electrical. I guess maybe in case the hot water heater explodes or something. I don't know what that little panel is going to do for that, but it does make me feel better having the separation between the two. All right, so bear with me here on this one. I am drilling a hole one way, and then I'm going to drill a hole back up the other way and basically make like a little curved L channel. And my reason for doing this is because I had to move that thermostat that was right there on the wall. I obviously don't want the thermostat to go behind the TV, so I wanted to move it on the side right here. Plus I figured it would I guess read better if it wasn't right there by the fireplace. So right here I'm wrapping this in electrical tape to kind of keep all the wires together. And then I'm just bending it and seeing if I can kind of make a hook shape and kind of feed it through without kind of stressing the wires or putting any tension on the wires. Again, lots of ways to do this, but it was like such a short little area feeding it through, and it worked like a charm. So now I can move the thermostat over there and everything will be great. And then I can start framing this box in now that I have all of the electrical in the place that I want it to be. So this is just 5mm underlayment, 1/4 inch paneling, whatever you want to call it, that I just cut on my table saw. And I don't know if you remember, but I did have to clip 2 wires when I was moving this around so I could get my framing in. So before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and join those together. There's really 2 ways you can do this. One is soldering, which I'm about to show you. There's my heat shrink tubing. You take the 2 ends and you twist them and wrap them together. And then you heat it with your soldering iron and get some solder. And basically you'll know if it's right because the solder, when you press it on the wire, it'll just flow through. And then I just use some pliers to make sure there's no like pricklies or anything that the heat shrink tubing can get caught on. Slide the heat shrink tubing up and then hit it with a little bit of heat and it'll shrink. But the other way to do it is getting like a crimp cap, and you'll need a special wire crimper tool for this, which I have, but I just figured I might as well solder it since I already had the electricity out here. And then I can start putting in the rest of these panels. Again, same thing, just cut them out on my table saw and crown staples. So now that I've done that, I can put my 2 side pieces in. This one was a nice snug fit, and I like a good snug fit. So I kind of just banged it in there because maybe it was a little too tight. So I got a piece of wood, made sure everything was nice and tight, and then I can put some staples on that side. And then same thing with the other side. These were actually the same size panels, which was great. So I know that my framing is square if it's the right size, which is always a good confirmation. Now, before I go any further and I close this bottom panel up, I haven't installed the antenna yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I just drill a hole up into the roof, and then I actually drilled the hole the same size as the thread for the radio antenna, so when it comes up, it's kind of threaded through the wood, and then I can thread this on top. And I forgot to film this, but of course I put some lap sealant around that baby to seal it up, and we're good to go for that. So I can go ahead and start putting all my panels in to make this square right here. So I start with the top, same thing, same type of wood. They may be different colors, but that's just because I have small scrap pieces all around the shop because I'm a wood hoarder and I'm like, hey, I could use that one day. And look, today is that day. I'm actually using it. So if you tell yourself, oh, I'll use that one day. I guarantee you'll use it one day. It may not be within the next year, but you'll use it. And see, this right here is another one of those scrap wood projects. You never know. So I am actually building a little divider that's going to separate the water heater and the electrical from the fireplace. I don't think there's going to be any residual heat or anything else like that. Plus, if they are willing to put a water heater beside the electrical, surely they're not worried about heat or anything else for that matter, water included. But this is just going to make me feel better. And before I put that in, I'm going to feed my wire through the electrical box right here, just because once I put that panel on top, I'm not really going to be able to pull it out too much and get to it. So I'm just going to feed the wire for the fireplace through this panel and just call it a day. That way it's done, and all I have to do is wire the breaker in. And again, obviously the power is off and the camper is unplugged, so y'all don't come at me for messing with that. Anyway, so I'll just sit this baby right in there, as you can see, and it fits perfectly. Screw it into the wall. This is not going to be like weight bearing or anything like that, so I'm not really too worried about it going into the studs, because it's really just there as a shield or a barrier for anything else that might want to come up or go down. So now all of the boxes are framed out and made. I'm going to go ahead and start on this side panel right here. And I'm kind of just judging where I want this wire to go based on my mind. I don't know. There's no math to that. So this is just paneling, leftover paneling that I had in the shop. This is actually 1/8 inch because I didn't have any 5mm, but it really doesn't matter what this is because it's really just a side piece to cover everything else, all the framing. Now this right here is, I tried to fit it underneath right there and cut it in one piece, and as you can see, it broke because it's like really flimsy, but that's okay because I made it work. So I just put it on and put the piece that broke off, and you can't tell the difference. So now I'm going to screw this in. That way it's not like hanging out loose anymore. And this is what it looks like. So we are ready for the face frame, which I will start on today. So I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you next time.